Hello everyone, this is Chris Keys, and in today's video we'll be painting crepe myrtle flowers using gouache paints. So the gouache paints that we'll be using is by a brand called Arteza. They sent over a nice package with some gouache paints, watercolor paper, and also water brushes. These trees are pretty much everywhere in my neighborhood. They're in magenta and purple, and also I've seen some white flower trees like these. So I'm just going to paint the pink ones, and I'm also going to paint a purple one using two similar but different techniques. So you can see the flowers up close. You can see that is if you see these trees from a distance, it has a lot of volume, and I have a lot of colors to work with. When I first opened the package, I was impressed by like the variety of colors. It's not just a pink, it's like a peach pink or a pale pink, or they have like categories of colors and then subcategories. So I like that because I don't have to mix too much. So I'm going to use peach red, crimson red, and rose for the pink one, and then for the purple flower I'm going to use Russian blue, ultramarine, mauve pale, and then I will use a mixture of their green gouache paints for the stems of the flowers. Okay, so this is my paint palette. Excuse it, it's a mess. Not always, but most of the time I forget to wash my paint palette after I finish painting, so the inks and stuff have dried up, but it's okay. I'm just gonna use my paints on top of it. But you can see already that the gouache paints are very pigmented, and I love that. I can already tell, and I'm trying this for the first time with you. I have not opened it up and tried it. This is my first impression as well, so I already like that it seems like it's pigmented. Alright, so I'm using a wet to wet technique. I'm wetting my paper first in the shape of my flower. I've taken 2 sheets of their watercolor paper that they gave me, which is in cold press, and they're 9x12, and I have taped it together because I want this to be larger than a 9x12. Alright, so you can see the shape that I have put the water down on the watercolor paper. It's pretty thick. I'm taking a Japanese calligraphy brush. I'm dipping my brush in this gouache paint. I've mixed together all 3 of the pink colors that I showed you in the beginning, and I'm just pretty much stippling the gouache paint down, and you want to do it pretty quickly so that the water doesn't start to dry if you want this to be a very fluid and dreamy and soft gouache painting. So already like I said, I could tell that it was going to be pretty pigmented, and I was right. It is very pigmented. It's very true to color. I am a illustrator that I love watercolor mediums. So, watercolors, gouache, ink. However, I don't really like this really soft, almost like pastel, like you can barely see type of watercolors. I like for my paintings, especially my flower paintings, if I'm using it for a print for a fabric or something, I like for them to be very vibrant yet soft. So using the wet to wet technique helps me to fulfill that look, because I can put down a lot of paint without it looking too stiff, because the water is going to spread it out, and it's also not going to look like that very like nursery type of watercolor painting. All right, so you can see that it's getting some volume. If you've ever seen these trees, you know that from a distance it just looks like a big bouquet of flowers. So I'm just going to keep trying to put in more brush strokes with this gouache paint. And I also like that the gouache paints are really creamy. Sometimes you'll get gouache paints that are pretty thick and you'll have to thin it out, but it already has that very smooth consistency. So so far I like it. So I'm just kind of alternating between my calligraphy brushes and putting in more and more stipple, and I'm literally just holding my brush in the middle of the brush and just putting down these lines really, really quick and really light. And you can see that the flower is starting to pick up like some shadows. It's starting to look like a more of a 3D flower versus, you know, something that's flat on the paper. And that's pretty much because in some areas the water is blending out the color and having it very light, and then some areas it's pretty dark. So just keep that in mind. You don't want your flower painting to be all one tone. You kind of want it to have this dark and light feel so that it looks like it's a full 3D flower without, you know, drawing too much detail. All right, so I'm just taking some water and sort of blending out the pieces that I feel are too stiff, and then I'm going to put some water down for the stem areas. So for the stem, I am mixing together 2 green paints. The first one is called sap green and the other one is pale green, and they also have a burnt umber color that I'll use for the second flower. And I'm just pretty much stroking my paintbrush across the painting, across the flower, and creating these very loose stipples of green color under each like flower petal, flower bud. All right, so that's pretty much the first flower. Like I said, I'll be using 2 similar but different techniques. That has a little bit more detail. For the purple one, I'm going to draw it a little more loose, and this can even be more loose than these 2. So I put down more water for this one, and I am stippling it using the complete side of my brush. So you can see that I didn't use the tip of my brush. I'm using the side so that the brush strokes are a little bit larger. And I'm using this small Japanese calligraphy brush, but if you wanted to, you can always use a larger one. I've used larger ones in my previous videos for other paintings. So if you don't want these brush strokes to be very small and fine, you can use a large brush or a large watercolor brush. All right, so you can already semi-tell the difference between these 2. This one is just a little more expressive. The brush strokes are not as tight. And like I said, there's more water on this part. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking the tip of my brush and drawing the leaves for this flower. And like I said, for the first one, I just mixed together 2 green colors. For this one, I've mixed together the green colors, but I'm putting a burnt amber color. And you can see how this like brown and green color is blending in with the flower. It's not really this vast distinction between the flower and the stem and the leaves. All right, so those are the finished flowers using Arteza Gouache paint. Like I said, I really like this paint. I'm going to do some more tutorials, and let me know if you have any more like color combinations that you want me to try out, or any more flowers that you want me to paint using these gouache paints. I'll definitely do some fashion illustrations using the gouache paint as well, for those of you who are interested in learning more about fashion illustrations. Thank you for watching. I have a link below if you're interested in purchasing these gouache paints or anything else by Arteza. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a great week painting, and talk to you later. Ciao.